I used to work in insurance. Well, one of those old, stale buildings, the ones that just made you feel like you're in a concrete jungle. Well, I was done with school and I needed to do something to make money. Going to college or university was now out of the picture. I was now job hunting, looking for a way to put food on the table. And I prayed to God every day. Little did I know that He would soon answer my prayers. Well, after a newspaper search on one Wednesday evening, I finally came across a listing that seemed quite interesting to me. It was a job in insurance. It was for an insurance company called Momentum. Well, it was my first time ever working in a corporate office environment, and I was working in a call center. And what we were doing was outsource cold calling. So our department dealt with car, home, and business insurance. Basically, we would call random people. We would make up to 200 calls per day. Just call up people and ask them if they wanted insurance. Now, because we were working on a cold calling system, this way we had no information. We had no way of knowing who was who, whether they owned the business. I remember time after time, I would call a prison warder, a stay-at-home mom, a taxi driver. From time to time, you'd have people just tell you off in the worst way possible. I mean, that's what would make your day even harder. So basically, we'd call people and sell them insurance. So it was a job in sales, fundamentally. So for myself, I found it incredibly difficult to make these sales. I mean, who in their right mind would give you their bank details over the phone after calling them for the first time? And that's when I noticed the board on the wall, the infamous board on the wall. So every call center has a board with every employee's name on it, and next to it you will have a column, or basically 5 columns, to represent the 5 days of the week. Some of them have 6 or 7. So basically you'd have your name. For example, it would say number 1, John. Next to John, there'd be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on. And every day, all of your sales would be recorded over there. I remember in the first month I was working here at Momentum, I was only 19 at the time. In the first month, I'd recorded 0 sales. Thank God the company I was working at paid a basic salary and not only commission like most call centers. So even though I made 0 sales, but for my effort and coming in to work, I still got paid something. But generally, next to my name, you'd see a long line of zeros. It looked like a train, or rather train wheels. It looked like an 18-wheeler. It was embarrassing, degrading, and whilst getting those zeros, my colleagues next to me were knocking it out of the park, getting sales after sale. Payday would come and I'd get my basic salary of about 2,000 rands at the time, and my colleagues would get up to 18,000 rands, 25,000 rands, whilst being praised every day by their office manager and supervisors, calling them all these great names, whilst I was being degraded and called other names. Well, they spoke in another language which they thought I couldn't understand, but I understood it as well. Basically, it was translated as to, this dog is only here to collect our basic salary. So that was call center life for you. Now, you might ask why it was so difficult for me. Well, maybe I'm just not good at sales, but come on. 200, 300 calls every day, nothing. And those guys are making sale after sale, hundreds of sales per week. I remember on Thursdays were actually my worst day because we would work from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. at night. And on those days we'd make up to 500, 600 calls. Well, now the first thing that I noticed when I started working in this place was everyone smoked so much. Everyone was a really heavy smoker. Cigarettes were all over the place. Coffee was another thing. Everyone was a coffee addict. Everyone had to stay at work on their toes. So I thought naturally, yes, caffeine is good for such a high stress environment. It's a hot call center. The AC is bad. You have about 50 people in there. But I didn't realize what actually made those guys so incredibly efficient when it came to making sales, and why their sales were through the roof. Well, there were two huge reasons that I would find out only months later after befriending some of the people. Reason number one, it wasn't only the coffee. Some of my colleagues were playing with their nose. They had that snowman powder, if you know what I mean. I'm not really going to say the name of the drug because it might get censored for certain reasons. But yes, in the bathrooms and in the toilets, people on their lunch breaks would go to the bathroom and play with their nose, both men and women. So when they would come back after their lunch break, where some of us mere mortals, normal human beings, would be falling asleep after having a huge lunch and coming back into this stuffy office. These people would be on their feet 24/7, making sale after sale. The tone, their pitch, their voices, the body language would not relent, would not change. They would be the same from 8 a.m. up until 8 p.m. and then jump into their fancy BMWs and go. Well, reason number two was more sinister. It was fraud. A lot of my colleagues were basically making fraudulent sales. They actually found a loophole in the system, something that I never saw because I was new. So what they would do would be, they would sometimes speak to the clients over the phone and get the information, whether it was house, home, or business insurance. The client could be saying one thing and they would enter something else into the system. So at the end of the call, the client would then get a very low premium and they'd be told, well, this premium is only going to be running for today or for the next 2 days, there's a special offer. And then the client would even ask for some paperwork or some kind of proof and they would be shown. But not knowing that the client's initial information, especially, so for example, let's say if it was car insurance, if the guy was 25 years old driving a Ferrari, it means your monthly premium would go really high and the insurance would be expensive because you are a high risk client. So they would put maybe the client still there, 25 years old, but instead of a Ferrari, the guy would enter a Volkswagen, a Beetle, for example, a 1968 version of the Beetle. So therefore, yes, although he is young and high risk, but the car is also quite old and not as fast, and therefore his premium would come down. So this is how these guys would be making sales. In fact, this was just one of the ways. This is what I never knew. So you might ask yourself, how was this possible? How could these things be done? Well, the way it works is that after you have, especially if you have done it over the phone, after you had made some kind of agreement and basically taken out insurance, say for your vehicle, for example, you only get the policy documents after about 3 weeks, so that's 21 days. So by the time you're going through your documents and seeing that some information was incorrectly entered into the system, that guy has already got his commission, he's already got his sale, and the money is coming through to his bank account. So naturally, the next thing that you would do is to call the insurance company and tell them to correct this and that. Well, you'll then be met by a different department, someone from somewhere else, from the helpline desk. And usually the person from the helpline desk would not be in contact with the person who made the sale. Sometimes they don't even know each other or which branch from which your sale was made. So whilst this person is trying to help you and get to the bottom of things, this could take up to a month or two. And the guy on the other hand, or the agent who made the sale, is moving on to the next victim. And by this time, he's already making his money. He doesn't care. Sometimes it would take up to 6 months, 4 to 6 months, to track the agent that made that fraudulent sale. And by then, everything is now in the past. They could easily explain it away. They could just say it was an error. And this is how these guys were getting away with this fraudulent activity. Now you ask yourself, aren't there ways that these insurance companies kind of track these calls or to see if their agents are actually going according to scripts or, check for fraudulent activities. Yes, there is something that you call the LQA, the Listening Quality Assurance. So this would be a team of usually women, about 5 or 6 people, sometimes 8, that would have a certain place in the call center as well, usually away from the agents, so they're basically like your external auditors, but only except that they work for the company. So from time to time, they would sit in and listen to the calls that the agents are making. But now keep in mind, one agent alone can make up to 200 calls. And now you have a call center with about 50 agents. So 200 multiplied by 50, in one day, that would be about 2,000 calls. How many of those calls do you think are fraudulent? Not that many. Out of 2,000, if, say, 850 calls are fraudulent, it wouldn't be that easy to pick up. I'll tell you why. Because these call center agents know the exact lingo and words to use to not sound like they, doing something wrong. That's first and foremost. Secondly, after listening to about, say, 500 calls, I think your ears alone, your mental ability, the capacity to, pick up on every word and everything kind of gets weakened, and therefore you can't really blame them. So that's what they do. So here's my advice. This is from someone who had worked in 5 different call centers, First and foremost, every call is being recorded. So you're going to make sure that everything you say is quite loud and clear. But never ever hand over your banking details to someone over the phone. Ask them to send you a quote of the policy document, or at least a quote, so that you can see exactly what's been written down. But I would also, advise you to go into the offices yourself and take out an insurance policy. That's the safest way to actually make sure that everything's been done according to book. Also, now I've worked for some of the most famous insurance companies in South Africa. I'm talking about places like Outsurance, Auto & General, One Life Direct, Oakshore, and some of these things were still being done there. So this is why I say it's better for you to walk into an office or have a broker. But the broker, you should know the broker as well, But in general terms, never ever give sensitive information over the phone. Thank you very much.